everyone, welcome back. Today, we're taking a deep dive into one of the most notoriously challenging chapters of James Joyce's Ulysses,
Yeah.
episode 7, Aeolus. Now, if you're not super familiar with Ulysses, don't worry.
Right.
We'll give you the context you need as we go. But the main thing to know is that this episode is kind of like cracking a code. It's loud, chaotic, and full of these swirling ideas and conversations.
That's right. It's a whirlwind. And just like a whirlwind can blow you off course, this episode can leave readers feeling a bit disoriented.
Yeah.
But that's all part of Joyce's genius. We're going to use a really insightful YouTube video analysis by Chris Reich as a guide today.
Okay.
And he makes a great point about how this chaos is actually mirroring a specific moment in the Odyssey, the epic poem that Ulysses is based on.
The Odyssey. For anyone who needs a quick refresher, it's the story of Odysseus, a Greek hero, trying to get home after the Trojan War.
Right.
So what's the connection to Aeolus?
Well, in the Odyssey, Odysseus encounters Aeolus, the god of the winds, and Aeolus gives Odysseus this bag of winds to help speed him home. Sounds pretty straightforward. Right?
Yeah.
But here's the catch. Odysseus's men get curious and open the bag,
Oh, no.
unleashing this chaotic storm that blows them completely off course. And guess what? The structure of Aeolus mirrors this disastrous one-hour return journey.
Okay, I'm starting to see the parallel here.
Yeah.
So instead of a smooth narrative,
Right.
we get this jumbled, chaotic experience
Yeah.
that reflects the feeling of being caught in a storm. But how does Joyce actually create that feeling in the text?
He does it brilliantly through sensory overload.
Yeah.
Think about all the sounds in a busy newspaper office. The clattering typewriters, the shouting newsboys, the constant ringing phones. Joyce throws all of this at us, along with these snippets of conversations and his really vivid descriptions of the characters.
Yeah.
It's like he wants us to feel the overwhelming noise and activity of Dublin in 1904.
And in the middle of all of this, we have Leopold Bloom, our main character, trying to make his way through this storm of words and distractions. He's actually got a pretty clear goal to secure an ad placement for a client named Keys. But it's almost like everything is working against him.
It is.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how Joyce sets this up. We have Bloom, this practical, down-to-earth guy, trying to get something concrete done.
Right.
And then you have all these other characters who are caught up in this world of words and ideas.
Right.
But are these words actually achieving anything? That's the question Joyce wants us to ask.
It's like he's contrasting action and rhetoric, right? Bloom is all about action, while everyone else is just blowing hot air.
Yes.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because it makes you think about what Joyce is saying about society as a whole. Is he suggesting that we value superficiality over substance? That we're more impressed by fancy words than actual results?
That's a great observation. And it's definitely something to keep in mind as we explore the episode further. Think about it. Bloom is actually mocked for his earnestness, his desire to get things done. Meanwhile, the people around him are praised for their wit and eloquence, even though their words are ultimately empty.
It's like the episode is holding up a mirror to our own tendency to get caught up in appearances and distractions.
Yeah.
It's making me think about all the times I've been more focused on sounding smart than actually accomplishing something meaningful. Have you ever felt that way?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a universal human experience.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that makes Aeolus so powerful.
Right.
It's speaking to these very deep, very human anxieties about meaning and purpose in a world that's constantly bombarding us with information and distractions.
And it's doing it in a way that's both challenging and incredibly rewarding.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about the chaos and the contrast between Bloom's practicality and everyone else's hot air.
Right.
What are some other key elements we need to understand?
Well, one of the most intriguing aspects of Aeolus is this recurring biblical motif of Mary and Martha,
Okay.
which Chris Reich highlights in his video.
Oh.
Now, these two figures represent contrasting approaches to life.
Okay.
Mary, the contemplative listener, symbolizes a more spiritual, receptive way of being, while Martha, who's busy preparing and doing things, represents a more worldly, active approach.
Okay, so where this might be going. We have Molly Bloom, Leopold's wife,
Right.
who embodies that Mary energy.
Yeah.
She's sensual, intuitive, and connected to her emotions.
Exactly. And then you have various other women who appear in the episode, like Martha Clifford,
Right.
who represent the Martha side of things.
Yeah.
They're more concerned with practical matters, social status, and in some cases, vying for Bloom's attention.
Okay.
It creates this really interesting dynamic, almost like a subtle competition for Bloom's heart and mind.
That's a great point. I never really thought about it that way before. It's
Yeah.
like this underlying tension between the spiritual and the worldly, the contemplative and the active, playing out in Bloom's relationships with women. And it makes me wonder if this tension is also reflected in Bloom's own character. Is he torn between these two ways of being?
It's a question worth pondering,
Yeah,
and it speaks to the complexity of Joyce's characters.
right.
They're not simple one-dimensional figures. They're grappling with these very real human dilemmas, trying to find their place in a world that's full of contradictions and competing desires.
This is getting really deep.
Yeah.
But I love it. It's making me want to go back and reread the episode with all of these new insights in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of insights, there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to talk about. Stephen Dedalus. He makes a brief but significant appearance in Aeolus.
Yeah.
And he tells this really obscure parable that has confused readers for decades.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Stephen's parable. It's definitely one of the most challenging parts of the episode, but it's also one of the most rewarding because it gives us a glimpse into Stephen's brilliant but troubled mind.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't met Stephen yet, he's basically the other main character in Ulysses.
Right.
He is a young, aspiring writer, and he's struggling to find his voice and his place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So what's this parable all about?
Well, on the surface, it's a seemingly simple story about two virgins standing on Nelson's Pillar in Dublin, spitting plum seeds down onto the barren land below.
Okay.
But of course, with Joyce, nothing is ever simple.
I've got a feeling there's a lot more to unpack here.
You're absolutely right. In fact, this parable is layered with symbolism and allusions, and it connects to some of the deepest themes of the novel.
Mm-hmm.
But to really understand it, we need to dive into the biblical story that it's based on.
Okay, I'm ready to dive in.
So the parable that Stephen tells is actually a reworking of the biblical story of Moses and Mount Nebo. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses leads the Israelites out of Egypt,
Okay.
but is denied entry into the Promised Land because of his lack of faith.
Oh, wow.
Instead, he's only allowed to view it from afar, from the top of Mount Nebo.
Wow, okay. I'm starting to see the connection. So in Stephen's parable, the two virgins represent the Israelites, and Nelson's Pillar becomes their Mount Nebo, right? But what about the plum seeds and the barren land? What's the significance there?
That's where it gets really interesting. The plum seeds, in a way, symbolize potential, the possibility of growth and fertility.
Okay.
But they're being spit onto barren land, which suggests that this potential is being wasted, that it's not able to take root and flourish.
Right.
And this is where the parable becomes a powerful commentary on Ireland itself.
You're saying that Joyce is using this parable to talk about the state of Ireland in the early 20th century.
Exactly. Remember, at this time, Ireland was still under British rule,
Right.
and there was a lot of frustration and unrest among the Irish people.
Yeah.
They felt like their country was being held back, that its potential was being stifled. So in a way, Stephen's parable is a reflection of that feeling of frustration and unfulfilled promise.
It's like those plum seeds represent the hopes and dreams of the Irish people. But the barren land symbolizes the political and social conditions that are preventing those dreams from coming true.
That's a really insightful way to put it, and it's made even more poignant by the fact that Nelson's Pillar, which was a symbol of British power in Dublin,
Right.
was actually blown up by the IRA in 1966. It's almost like Joyce was predicting the eventual fall of British rule in Ireland.
That's incredible. It really makes you think about the power of symbolism
Yeah.
and how art can sometimes foreshadow real-world events.
Right.
But let's go back to Stephen for a moment. Why is he telling this parable in the first place? What's his motivation?
Well, remember that he's surrounded by newspapermen in this scene.
Okay.